Good day to you. Yes, topic 1. We're about to get this going. Off the ground. Man. Sorry, it's very early in the morning right now. It's like, I don't know what the time is, but it's early, okay? And I am drinking coffee. Yeah! Most of you who encounter me in class get me about 2 hours after the coffee has kicked in, but now you're getting me right as it's happening, son. So let's see how this goes. Usually I spend this time when I'm jacked on caffeine writing. But today I shall be screaming at the microphone as I'm teaching you about research methods, the most exciting class ever. Okay, let's it's not exciting, okay? Research methods is not an exciting class. I love it for several reasons. Number one, I learned in graduate school that no professor ever wants to teach this. And so my mentor in grad school, his name was James Willis, a great policing scholar, told me, he said, hey Martin, if you want to get hired by other universities, you should teach a lot of research methods while you're in graduate school. So I like research methods for the fact that it helps with my career. I also like research methods because it helps you understand how we get data. Okay, so think of your textbook. Look at any textbook. Think of any textbook that you've ever had, right? People don't just come up with this information that they write in it. Like the author of your textbook's not just like, oh, you know what's a profound idea? Hotspots policing. No, they look at existing research. So they look at what is the research that's been produced about hotspots policing, and then they compile that all into a couple paragraphs that you then have to read, and then we test you on. Right? So every single textbook that you've read in criminal justice has been based on scientific research. All right? And what research methods is, it is looking at, well, how did we collect that data? Did we even collect that data correctly? So research methods, while it might be boring to you because we're going to be learning about some pretty seemingly boring concepts, it's very important because one day you, because you're getting a degree, you're going to be a manager of sorts, whether you're a police supervisor, whether you're a police chief, whether you're a prison warden, or whether you're, I don't know, like a freaking supervisor at DCS, okay? You are going to be presented with data. The world is not moving away from data, even though it sometimes seems like it, given that our politicians believe in rhetoric and not science. But everything else is data-driven in this world. Everything else. And it's not going away, okay? So you're going to be confronted with data, and you need to be able to know, is this good data or is this bad data? And research methods helps with that. Let's get the show on the road. Wow, I spent 4 minutes just sort of introing all this. How do you guys like my PowerPoint slide? This is like a good intro page, right? I like those patterns. And now that I'm all jacked on the coffee, the patterns are making me like, it's kind of like popping. You know what I mean? Just think if someone is like on shrooms looking at this. It'd be pretty trippy, wouldn't it? Or, I don't know. Okay. Okay, next slide. Oh, okay, so it's not working. Okay, aha! Okay. So, why study research methods? Well, I kind of addressed some of that in my pre-lecture rant. We need to know how people collected data and how they conducted their research. Because if someone didn't do it properly, their findings are fraud. It's not good. It's dumb, right? It's like these. Have you ever been catfished by a news article on Facebook or Twitter or whatever? Like, you know, like sometimes on Twitter or on Facebook, you'll get like this heading that says, eating pizza is healthy for you, and you're like, what? And then you click on it, and it's like, compared to eating cereal, which is completely full of sugar, and eating that with whole milk, yeah, pizza is healthier for you. And it's like, yeah, but that's kind of like saying that, you know, cocaine is healthier than heroin, right? They're both pretty bad for you, right? And so, but you didn't know that until you clicked on the actual article and then you read, oh, no, this is a bunch of buffoonery. This is a bunch of crap. This is a bunch of freaking clickbait. And I hope the person who wrote this stubs his toe on the edge of his bed. Because guess what? It was probably some man who did it. Okay? Where was I? All right, yeah, so research methods is kind of like the same way. So what happens is some researcher says, oh, I found that hotspots policing actually reduces crime. And then we go and we're like, really? For real, bro? Let's look at your research methods. And then you're like, oh yeah, no, your research methods are good. It actually does, you're right. You collected a random sample, you tested that sample systematically, and it was ethical, blah, blah, blah. We believe you, bro. Right, so it helps us determine whether our data is good or bad. For instance, a lot of these news organizations, right, like Fox News, they'll send out a survey or whatever, and then they'll be like, oh, we found that 10% of people are gonna vote for Trump next year. And it's like, that doesn't make sense to me. And that's because maybe that news agency that put out that survey only has a bunch of liberals that are following them on Facebook. And so the people who are taking that survey are people who are probably not going to vote for Donald Trump. Right? So that data is skewed. It's biased. Because they didn't select their respondents in a proper way. Right? So even though they have a survey that might be a really good survey, right? The people who they gave that survey to is not that good. Right? So that would be crappy data. And that is often the case in the business world. Right? Like, you know how like you you watch these commercials, right? Oh, I took this pill and then I lost, 80 pounds and I have beautiful pecs. And you're like, whoa, I want to get that pill, right? Well, yeah, and then you find out, okay, well, those pills were given to people who are already working out all the time and eating pretty well, right? So was it really the pill that made those people so beautiful, or was it the fact that they were eating well and exercising regularly? I think of all these dumbass commercials that offer weight loss or proper skincare, like, oh, I got rid of all my acne by using this thing, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, they also ate well and took regular baths and weren't going through puberty. So, in our world today, unfortunately, there's a lot of fake-ass science or pseudoscience. Science that says, oh, you're gonna get, if you vaccinate your kids, you're gonna give them this and that. No, you're not going to, okay? You need to vaccinate your freaking kids. Yeah, maybe in some cases there has been some association with like autism and some of these other problems that they're pointing out. But on the whole, overall, there's far more support for the fact that vaccinating your children is better for society and for your children. Right? That person who found that the vaccinations, the measles vaccination and all that other stuff was associated with autism, his data was whack. So what happens, unfortunately, in our society is that people want to, people have an agenda, right? For instance, I'll give you another example. Back in the day, we used to have lead in our gasoline, right? And you know how you drive up and it says like, oh, unleaded. Well, we used to have lead in our gasoline, and what was happening was we were pumping all of this lead into the air, and people were inhaling it and living around it and being in lead fumes all the time. And so you had this one researcher that went and was like, I think this is bad. I think lead levels have increased significantly, since we started having cars that were running on leaded gas. And this is toxic and this is bad for you, right? And so this researcher started doing all this research and finding proof of it. And essentially I don't quote me on this, but just to break it down for you, I think what happened was this person went to like Antarctica or the Arctic, one of the cold places, one of the poles, okay? And dug down into the ice and took out a massive piece of ice, right? Because on the poles, right, snow would fall and then it would freeze, and then snow would fall on top of that and it would freeze, and like kind of like the bark on a tree, right? With each year, the snow freezes and it then becomes part of the ice. So if you dig down very deep in that ice, in a glacier or whatever, or in that ice, right, you can get ice that existed like hundreds and thousands of years ago. And so what he did was he dug down in that ice, and then he looked at the layers of ice. And then he found the closer that he got, the closer he got to the current day's layers of ice, the more lead was in the ice. And so he could then pretty much scientifically say, yeah, we're just pumping a bunch of lead in there. Well, guess what? All these gas companies started lobbying Congress and freaking out, coming up with their own science, saying, oh no, this is fake, this guy's full of crap, and almost destroyed this guy's career, right? Until we finally started listening to him. So people have agendas, and you can manipulate science in any way you want. And unfortunately, our politicians are very good at destroying the reputation of good science and lobbying for bad science. And so in this class, we're going to determine what is good science and what is bad science. So the next time you hear some climate change denying Republican, or I don't know if there are any climate change denying Democrats, but they're wrong. They are wrong. The same science that allows us to communicate through the internet, the same science that allows us to fly a frickin' plane, okay, has proven that climate change is happening and that human beings are contributing to it, okay? So you can't deny that anymore. So when you hear a politician spout some data saying that it's not happening, they are wrong. They don't care about you. They only care about their money. So yeah, anyways. So let's get a little bit more theoretical on things, more philosophical, right? So think about reality, right? Reality really is just what we think is real, right? Like, think about reality. So reality, when you think about it, there's really two things that impact what one person thinks is real. And we call those things experiential reality and agreement reality. So experiential reality are the things that we say are real because that's what we've learned from direct experience. Okay? Right? Like, who here's ever gotten stung by a bee? Who here has ever gotten broken up with and been like, dude, being broken up with sucks? Right? Who here has ever failed an exam and been like, oh, damn, that's not good. It's not good when you fail an exam. Right? So these are things that you learn from just your own life, your own experiences. But then there's also things that we say are real, but we have never experienced them. For instance, do you believe the sun is hot? Do you believe the sun is hot? Right? I believe that as much as I believe anything else. But have you ever been on the sun? How do you know that that heat that you feel in the summer is actually from the sun? Right? Or what's another good agreement reality? Oh, history. That history existed the way that it existed. Right? Or you have some people who think the earth is 5,000 years old. And then you have some people who think the Earth is way older than that because we've done carbon dating. And said, no, the Earth is not 5,000 years old. Okay, bruh. Doesn't mean that the Bible is wrong, by the way, but I'm just saying that. The Earth is not 5,000 years old, we know that. But that's agreement reality, because no one here is 5,000 years old. No one here is several billion years old. But there's ice, and there's carbon that is billions of years old. Okay? But nonetheless, we have things that we agree on and say that's real. Pretty much a lot of things that you read, that you see on TV, right? We agree that those things are real, but you've never really experienced them, right? And so both experiential reality and agreement reality are a part of science, but they're also a part of lies and things that ruin innovation and progress. But these are the two realities that are impacted by information, right? You might have an experience that is very unique and it's just an anomaly, right? It's not normal. And then that might change what you think is actually normal or right. Or you might have been indoctrinated by a false religion, by a bad professor or teacher, by selfish, greedy politicians, or bad scientists. But those things, right, but either way, our realities are shaped, or what we believe is reality is shaped by our own experience and by what we believe when it comes to what other people have told us. Maybe you can think of some examples in your own life of both experiential reality and agreement reality. So where does scientific research come in? So science is empirical, okay? Empirical is when we produce knowledge, when we create new knowledge through systematic observation, right? We're being systematic about it. So that's different from the regular way that we live our lives. Like when we regularly go about our lives, things are casual. We're casually observing things, casually learning things. But when we're doing it casually, we're not being intentful about what we're observing and learning. Whereas scientific research or empirical research is much more about the systematic observation of things. For something to be considered scientific, then, it must not just be a systematically observed phenomenon, but it must also make logical sense. It must fit in with everything else that we know about society, or life, or the cosmos. Something can be logical, but not have any empirical support. For instance, flat earth theory, okay? Look up some of this flat earth theory BS. Right? These people are saying, well, have you ever seen the earth is round? No, I have not, okay? Because the earth is so damn big, it's hard to see that there is a freaking curvature. Well, why are all the freaking buildings in New York, all at the same level? Because it is so damn large that you can't notice it with the naked eye. But let's say I'm some dude back in the day, right? Back in the day, before we had planes and spaceships and satellites and all that stuff. And I'm like, all right, the earth seems flat to me. All right, the earth seems flat to me, okay? Because everything else that I've known is flatness, right? But then it's kind of weird that you have this sun that just like, it starts in one side and then it goes over to the other side. But it's weird to me. I don't get that. That doesn't make sense to this whole flat earth situation. So something is up. So what I need to do is I need to systematically observe whether the earth is actually flat, because everything else around me tells me the earth is flat. Then you have the sun and these stars and the moon and stuff, and they rise in one spot and then they go away, right? And that to me says something other than the earth is flat. So maybe the earth is round or something is up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to systematically prove that the earth is either flat or round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on a boat, right? I'm going to build a beautiful lighthouse on the coast. And I'm going to get my ass on a boat, and I'm just going to go in one direction. And if the earth is flat, then I should be able to see that lighthouse for a very, very long time. But if the earth is round, that lighthouse should start to disappear behind the horizon. So I'm going to get my ass in that boat and I'm going to start going. And guess what? The lighthouse started disappearing. And that was one of the first experiments actually done a long, long time ago to prove that the earth was actually round. So these on the internet who say, no, we live on a flat earth and there's a display case and the sun is actually, the sky is a display mechanism. We never landed on the moon. That's all fake. You're wrong. There's actually a documentary where these flat earthers try to use systematic observation. They try to find empirical support for their dumbass assertion. And guess what? They've actually found evidence that the earth was round. Look, I like me a good old conspiracy theory every now and then. But do you think there's aliens that are checking us out and we're living in a little petri dish? It's not the case, brah. We don't live in a matrix. This is it. This is where we are. Sorry, another rant. So coffee does these things. But seriously, if you believe in a flat earth, you need to read some books. Read some books and look, and I understand it's nice to belong to a group, right? Where other people believe the same crap as you. Right, you find that sense of community, but you can find that sense of community without having to believe in a bunch of crap. Okay, you can believe in regular things, right? Or go join a church, right? If that's what you want to do. By the way, I'm not saying that God doesn't exist or God isn't real or anything. I'm just saying that if you want to believe in stuff, that we can't scientifically ever prove. Like, we will never be able to prove that God exists or not with science. It'll just be impossible. It's just one of those things. We'll never be able to prove it. So if you want to belong to a group of people who believe in something, that science will never ruin that party for you, join a religion, right? Just don't join a weird one. Join one that's not too weird, all right? Whenever they say, hey, drink this, then it's a weird one, okay? But if they're like, hey, guys, let's go plant a community garden, whatever. I'm not going to be hurting anyone with that. Okay, all right, so we use the scientific method. We use systematic observation and logic, right, to test things in criminal justice. Some things that we consider are, what are the impacts of drug policies on society? What are the impacts of police interventions on crime? For instance, hotspots policing is something you're going to hear me talk about a lot because that's one of the most proven interventions, most successfully proven interventions that uses some of the best research methods to reduce crime. Recidivism is another thing that we talk about a lot. That is, recidivism, those of you who don't know what recidivism is, it is when recidivism is if you go to jail or prison, like when you're incarcerated, and then you go back to jail or prison or are rearrested afterwards. That's recidivism. And our recidivism rate across the country can can vary anywhere from 40% to 68%. So the 68% is only 3 years after release. And then after 5 years, it can go up as far as 75%, depending on where you're studying it, right? Remember, the U.S. criminal justice system is completely fragmented. So you have different counties, states, and federal systems, right? So depending on where you're measuring it and what types of crime you're looking at, those numbers differ. But it can go anywhere from as low as 40%. Even, let's take the lowest one, 40%. That's still a lot of freaking people. So more than a third of people are going back to jail or prison. That's not good. Okay? It's not good for money. Okay. So then what is anecdotal knowledge? So anecdotal knowledge is knowledge that you have gained that shapes your reality, but is not systematically observed. All right? So, for instance, you have... in graduate school, I remember I was in graduate school, and we were learning about the juvenile justice system in graduate school. And then there was one defense lawyer that was also seeking a PhD at that point. And that defense lawyer constantly was arguing with our professor, saying, that's not real, that's not true. You know, our professor would say one thing, and then this guy would say, that's not how I've seen it. Well, that's not how you've seen it. But that's anecdotal knowledge. That's your own experiential knowledge that shaped your reality. Right? We get this oftentimes with police officers. Right? I'll teach one thing in class, and the police officers say, well, that's not exactly how it happens here. Well, yeah, it's not exactly how it happens in your life. But if you look at all of these cases across the world or across the United States, that's what happens on average. So anecdotal knowledge is knowledge that you've gained from your own. It's kind of like experiential knowledge, but it can also be agreement knowledge, right, or agreement reality, because you might have your mom or dad might experience things a certain way, and then they tell you, oh, hey, your dad might be a cop, and might say, oh, the only way to talk to a bad person is to curse at them, because that's what they respect, that's what they understand. So anecdotal knowledge is knowledge that's based on personal experience or someone else that you know that you value, their personal experience. But it is typically not consistent with empirical knowledge, meaning that it wasn't scientific, it wasn't discovered systematically. It wasn't observed systematically. It was casually realized over time. And so the problem with anecdotal knowledge is that sometimes, like, human beings we don't pay the same amount of attention to every single thing. Think about that. Right? When you're driving, pretend you're driving. Envision yourself driving, right? You're driving through the city of Evansville, right? And you see the YMCA building, you see the Ford Center off in the back, and you see like the tip of the old courthouse sticking out. You see some people walking. You just notice there's people walking on the sidewalks. There's other cars, right? But you're focusing on the traffic light right now because you are at a traffic light. So you're looking at that light. You know right now there's people walking around, but your eyes are on that traffic light, right? You're also hearing some music coming from your stereo, right? But your eyes are focused on that traffic light. Boom, the light turns green, and there you go. Do you remember what shirt the homeless man that was walking behind you or walking on the sidewalk was wearing? No. Do you remember what the color of each individual car was that was that was on the opposite side of that intersection waiting for the light to turn green? No. Do you even remember how many cars there were? No. Right? You were going about your day, and you were focused on certain things that were important to you then. And so the same thing comes with anecdotal knowledge, is that when I'm a police officer or I'm a prison guard or a correctional officer, right? During my life, I focus on certain things. Certain things, they just take more. I just value certain things more and how I experience them, right? Of course, you're not going to so much remember the 50 people who were just regular Joe Schmoes who are, taking their tickets and leaving, not arguing with you. Your reality is going to be shaped more by those people who try to fight with you, who are rude to you. Right? That's going to shape your perception. For instance, as a professor, we sometimes get very cynical about students. Right? They're a bunch of lazy, complaining, they think everything should be handed to them on a plate. But not every student is like that. Most students are not like that. Most students understand that when they get a bad grade, it's their fault. Most students understand that when they don't hand something in on time, it is their fault, and then they should get a bad grade. But then you get these 5 students a semester across all 4 of my classes who will complain about every single thing. They get a bad grade. Why? Or the best is when a student emails you, I disagree with my grade on this. Oh, do you? What kind of PhD do you have, buddy? Okay? But the problem is you have these 5 students. They're the ones that are emailing you all the time. They're the ones who you interact with the most. So then, over time, those are the people I'm interacting with. I'm not systematically saying, hey, let's spend 5 minutes each day with each individual student and talk to them. No. My life is going on as normal. So I'm just interacting with these damn students who can't understand that you can't just, life isn't free, right? You have to work to get a degree. I'm not going to give you a participation medal. But I only interact with those students, so that's going to turn my perception to be more cynical. That anecdotal knowledge is going to shape my negative perception of students. Now look at police officers. You know why police officers have such a cynical view of society? Because they only interact with people who are at their lowest points in their lives. You don't call the cops and be like, hey, I'm going to call the cops to come to a birthday party. We don't do that. We call the cops when shit is going down. Or people call the cops on you when you're drunk, half naked in the street on PCP, thinking the road is a river and you're trying to swim on it. So anecdotal knowledge is what we learn through our personal experience or the experiences of people who we value around us. Scientific knowledge is knowledge that is logically and empirically supported. And it's hard for us all because anecdotal knowledge seems, our brains naturally value that more than scientific knowledge. But good scholars, good criminal justice decision makers, identify the difference between the two types of knowledge and know when to value which one. Right, we just sort of talked about this. Human beings, and think about everything we do as human beings. We want certainty. We want to know the future. Who here plays fantasy football? Right? Well, how do they determine those rankings at the beginning of the season, when you're doing your draft? How do they determine, right, that Aaron Rodgers or, Le'Veon Bell, I don't know if that's his name anymore, is ranked number 1? They determine that based on past performance, and they say, we think, we predict, we want this to be the future. Or think of the weather. Why do we care so much about the weather? I have an app, I have a widget on my phone, right? On my lock screen, I see what the weather predictions are, right? We want certainty. Everything we've done in society, the reason why we have homes, the reason why we have medicine, the reason why we have education, the reason why science exists is because we want certainty. It is natural for human beings to want certainty in life, to be able to predict the future. We naturally see patterns in the world. It's part of our evolution. That's why human beings are better than some of these other animals. Because we can see patterns in things, and we're like, oh, we see this pattern. We think this is what's going to happen next time when we see this pattern again. That's caused us to survive. It's caused us to to create amazing societies is because we are superior to other beings on this planet. Because we can see patterns and learn from them. More so than other animals can. Other animals can also see some of these patterns. Right? And so out of this came science. It said, okay. Let's not be so casual about the way that we're realizing these patterns. Let's try to be more systematic about it. Let's try to introduce a stimulus and see if we can reproduce those patterns. Right? Sometimes we see things, sometimes, we think a pattern's going to be supported and then something else happens. And you're like, whoa, that's crazy. We didn't expect that to happen. That's called an anomaly. An anomaly is when, is that one time when your car doesn't start after you turn the ignition key. Or who here has ever lit a firework, right? And then the fire goes down all the way into it. It smokes and then nothing happens. Misfire. Firework doesn't go off. That's an anomaly. About 99% of the time, that firework will go off. But something else happened and caused it not to happen. Right? That's called an anomaly. It's when something happens beyond the pattern. The problem with human beings is that we also notice anomalies. Right? In fact, when we notice a pattern and an anomaly happens, that freaks us out sometimes. And oftentimes in criminal justice policy, a lot of criminal justice policies have actually been shaped by anomalies. And that's bad decision making. And you know what freaking dumbass politicians, no, actually not dumbass, they're actually smart. They're actually evil. What evil politicians do is an anomaly happens and they exploit that anomaly to make policy to fit their agenda. Right? Let me give you an example. There's a lot of money to be made off of gasoline still. Right? Because oil is something that's going to run out at some point. So as we have less and less oil on Earth, right, the price is going to go up. So why try to be better on the environment? Let's burn as much oil as we can so that we can make more money off of it. And then we'll move over to these other forms of energy. But unfortunately, by then, once we've burned all that oil, nothing would be left. Everyone would be dead. But at least a couple people would be really rich. And the problem is you get these people, they lobby our politicians, they lobby our congressmen. What is lobbying? Lobbying is when, lobbying by definition is when you go and when I go to a politician, I say, hey, this is a very important thing to me. I want you to make policy that addresses this thing, right? So it's a very straightforward, right? It should happen. But you know what has happened, unfortunately, in the United States is if I want to go see a senator, go knock on a senator's door. Who are you? Martin Cohen? Ew, I don't know you. But if I am Mr. Rich Oil Executive, like, hey, Senator, I want to take you out on my private yacht to the Caribbean for about 4 days, and I'd like to discuss with you the importance of oil and how it will impact our economy over the next couple of years. I would love for you to come join me on my yacht. We'll go down to the Caribbean. We'll have wonderful meals. We'll have lots of quote-unquote meetings about policy. And then we'll go play a round of golf at my favorite golf course somewhere out in the Caribbean. I don't know. I don't even know how golfing is. I don't even like golf. Golf sucks. I like frisbee golf. But nonetheless, lobbying has become this thing where very rich people get access to politicians and then treat these politicians. They take them out on they give them these gifts. They take them out on these wonderful cruises and vacations and stuff to quote unquote discuss policy. I mean, if I go to the politician, hey, can you please stop burning oil? The politician's like, well, are you going to take me on a nice, ski trip or something at least? No, I make very, 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 very little money as someone who's in education. Which, by the way, would also be nice if you guys could do something about that, right? No, I'm not going to do that, bro, because Mr. Oilman is going to take me on a sweet-ass yacht trip. You don't have a sweet-ass yacht trip, so... Also, I'm going to buy some stocks in this company. So, and that's going to be really good for me. So, I am not going to make a good policy, right? And so then when an anomaly happens, so let's say you have this politician owns a lot of shares in oil. This politician knows, right? They know that oil is bad for the environment. But the way they see it, they're baby boomers, right? They're in their freaking 60s and 70s. They're going to die soon, so it doesn't matter to them. They're going to be rich, and then they're going to die, and then we're going to be here, right? And then our grandchildren are going to be here, okay? They don't give a crap. They don't care, okay? So now they are... So now you have a polar vortex coming in, hitting Indiana. Oh! All these people claiming climate change. Look, it's freaking negative 20 degrees. Okay, that was an anomaly. That doesn't happen often. It happens every now and then. And actually, you can use science to actually explain that because of global warming that is happening, right? But people will sometimes exploit an anomaly to make policy decisions. So when we think of science, science really is a form of secondhand knowledge, right? For many of us. Now, for the person conducting the study, it's firsthand knowledge, but for many of us, it is secondhand knowledge. You're learning this somewhere else. Like, all the stuff you're learning here is secondhand knowledge to you. Now, secondhand knowledge can be good when it's science, right? Secondhand knowledge can also be bad. And you get two forms of secondhand knowledge that make life difficult for us. And that is tradition, right? Things that we all know, or things that we've always been doing. And authority, trusting the judgment of people who have expertise, people you look up to. Okay? So the problem with tradition, and Americans love their tradition, and it's like, why? If you think about the best times in American history, it was when we went against tradition. Think of the Revolutionary War. We went against tradition. Think of the Civil War. We went against tradition. Think of World War II. We went against tradition. Think of any good television show that's ever come out. It's because that television show went against tradition. I remember when The Office came out. The Office was one of the first TV shows of its kind. It flipped a switch on sitcoms. It was just so different. It was so good. Think of the best music you've ever heard. The Beatles, right? Okay, no, most of you are like, the Beatles suck. They do suck. I don't like the Beatles. But a lot of people loved them back in the 60s. It's because they completely flipped music on its head. Same with Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash was essentially the first Eminem. Think about artists today. I mean, Lady Gaga, even though you can say whatever you want about her, she really changed pop music. Think about the band Queen. Queen, you know the reason why we have music videos? It's because of Queen, the band Queen. We have music videos because Queen, when they made that song Bohemian Rhapsody, created a video for it. And then after that, every single record label was like, we need to make a video for this hit. Also, Bohemian Rhapsody, which is one of the best songs of all time, right, is one of the first songs who did not fit the mold of every pop song. Most pop songs, you want to have them be about 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Right? That's like the standard time for a pop song. Bohemian Rhapsody is way longer than it's like almost twice as long as that. Okay? So some of the best things that's ever happened in human history is when we go against tradition. Yet Americans love their tradition. right? I'm part of an organization. I'm not going to call it out because I'm going to kick out of it, right? But whenever we do want to change something, they're like, well, that's the way we've always done things. It's like, why? Why does that matter? Right? Tradition is stupid. Yeah, it's the way we've always done things, but now we need to do things differently, bro. Right? Like, oh yeah. I mean, jeez. Just think of all these wonderful things we've done. If we just would let tradition destroy it. Right? So tradition is the things that everyone knows. Authority is when we trust the judgment of someone who we think has expertise, right? So when people hear Donald Trump says, I'm gonna fix the economy, and you're like, well, yeah, you're a businessman. You'll probably fix the economy, right? I remember one time, so those of you who don't know, I was born in Africa. I was born in South Africa. I lived in South Africa for 15 years of my life. Right? And I remember going to Canada with my wife's family is from Canada. So I remember going to Canada. We went to this hippie festival. And at this hippie festival, you had this dance group that came from Ghana, which is West Africa. Right? So I grew up in South Africa, which is at the southern tip of Africa, and then Ghana, which is like at the like northwestern area of Africa, right? It's like, you know where that big old bulgy area of Africa is? Like, it's over there. Okay. And so this group of people, it's a dance group, and they have their drums, they're making African music, and man, these hippies are all high and on shrooms, and they're loving this African music, right? And so they're like, and so the Ghanaian, I think it's Ghanaian, anyways, whatever. The group from Ghana then says, hey, let's teach you all this African dance. And they're teaching them these things and these dances. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what if these people from Ghana are just like, let's teach these high hippies just some random stuff that has nothing to do, that is actually not like a cultural traditional dance. It is just sort of like the hokey pokey, right? And tell them it is some African dance, right? So I'm saying this out loud. I'm saying this to my mother-in-law and her friend. I'm like, what if they're just doing this? And this one woman is like, well, I know a lot about dance. I studied dance, and this seems like a real African dance to me. And I go, yeah, well, I lived in Africa for 15 years. And she's like, oh, really? Well, then you must know. And the fact that she just trusted me because I lived in a different country and culture so far away from Ghana, right? And she just trusted me because I said I was from Africa, right? That is authority. Somehow that gave me authority. And I totally abused it, right? And all I was trying to do is I was just making a joke. They were probably teaching them the right type of dance. I just thought it would be funny because that's something I would do, right? I would tell people, oh yeah, no, yeah, this is from my home culture, right? But then I'm really just making them do the hokey pokey, right? Because it's funny. But that's what authority does. People believe people who are in power or people who hold some sort of power over them, right? We believe our parents, believe our grandparents, right? They hold that authority. And so secondhand knowledge can be good when it's scientific knowledge. But there's also these other forms of secondhand knowledge that hamper, or that mitigate the impact that scientific knowledge has. And so I'm not saying tradition is bad. I'm not saying authority is always bad. I'm not saying don't go to church, okay? I'm just saying that we, as human beings who are woke, quote unquote, should understand when we are receiving authority or when we're receiving tradition and say, okay, I hear this, but is this systematically observed? Is this science? How does this compare to my scientific knowledge? So, when we're just casually going about our lives, right, we can often inaccurately observe things. Humans often observe things inaccurately or remember things inaccurately. But with science, we use measurement devices. We use scales. We use surveys. We use data collection techniques, observation techniques, right? We often, as human beings, casually, we see something happen and we're like, this happens all the time, right? That's called overgeneralization. But in science, we collect large enough samples and conduct research on it, and then we replicate those studies over and over and over and over so that we can correctly generalize. In casual human inquiry, right, we observe, or we only pay attention to things that stick out to us, right? Remember that example I used of sitting at a traffic light? Well, with science, we say, hey, we're looking at all of these cases with the exact same amount of attention, and we're going to look at 500 of them. Oftentimes, human beings can use illogical reasoning in the way that we process things. And that's okay. But in science, we use scientifically proven constructs to say upon which to base our logic. In casual human inquiry, right, oftentimes ideology and politics come into play. But science doesn't do that. Science isn't a Democrat. Science isn't a Republican. Science is science. And science has sometimes proven that Democrats have made horrible decisions. One decision is Bill Clinton's Crime Victimization Act, or no, Violent Crimes Act. Yeah, I think it's a Violent Crimes Act of 1994. Bad news bears, Bill. But you know what, though? Bill Clinton in 2016 publicly apologized for that policy. Right. And like I said again, in science, we replicate. Those of you who don't know what replication is when you do a study in one area, and you do that study again, and you do that study again, and you do that study again, somewhere else. Again. Right? Until you never stop. Every time you do it, it just gives you more support for your theory or whatever. It's important because if we don't replicate, things change over time. There might have been something that's happened in society that's changed something. Just think how much our behavior has changed since smartphones have come out. Right? How might that impact crime? Or the internet? I mean, the internet threw everyone for a loop. I mean, back when I was in like middle school, high school, I was illegally downloading movies and music like crazy because the internet just allowed me to commit that crime. Although I didn't even know it was a crime at that point. And a lot of our laws didn't even define that as a crime. So replication is important. So, there are 4 purposes of research that you must know. The first purpose of research is exploratory. You're like, what's exploratory research? It's when we don't know anything about something and we're just trying to explore a little bit. That's my area of expertise when I do research. I like to explore things. Like my latest research has been on how has body cameras changed the way that people behave? Or how has body cameras changed the way that police officers behave on a routinely basis, right? We don't know that. So it's exploratory. It oftentimes serves as the beginning of other research to follow, right? So you find something and then you have other people try to confirm that or further explain that or further describe that, right? So to give you an example, in 1994, they implemented this thing called the assault rifle and high-capacity magazine ban, okay? And so a bunch of researchers, a large group of researchers studied the impacts of this ban, right? And so this is very interesting. So this bill, okay, was signed into law. It started in 1994, and then it had a sunset clause in it. And what that means is that in 2004 it ended, right? And so one of the reasons for that is that Republicans just would not allow it to happen unless there was a sunset clause in, right? And so what was going to happen is, like, we were going to study the impacts of this assault rifle ban and high capacity magazine ban and see, does it reduce gun crimes, and does it reduce the demand? Does it increase or decrease the demand for these types of weapons? And so this massive study was done, and it was inconclusive. The only thing that they found was that in all reality, high capacity magazine bans tend to be more effective, slightly more effective than assault rifle bans. Assault rifle bans were pretty much non-effective. Like, they just didn't, or there was not enough data to conclude that it was effective. But they did find that when you ban automatic pistols, right, like a Uzi, those work really well. And so when they looked at this, they were like, okay, well, what were some of the reasons why our data was so inconclusive? Well, first of all, companies like Sig Sauer, right, they knew this ban was coming. But in that actual law was another clause that said, it's called a grandfathering clause. So if guns were manufactured before the beginning date of that ban, those guns could still be sold, right? And so companies like Sig Sauer went and made a buttload of these guns. They had a massive surplus of these assault rifles, to the point where people were just still buying these things during that ban because they were grandfathered in, right? So it didn't really impact society. So the sunset clause then, so by the time the sunset clause kicked in, these things, they were able to make them again normally, right? So essentially, even though the law was put in place, assault rifles were really not actually taken away from society. Not in a meaningful way, not in a way to really impact society. And so that's actually what caused the inconclusive studies. Now, other research has found that banning assault rifles might not really be that useful. Yes, they will most definitely impact the amount of people who die during mass shootings, right? But mass shootings really don't happen that often compared to other types of shootings. And in all reality, I mean, those of you, some of you might be sitting in this class, you might have an AR-15, right? How much do you pay for that thing? Definitely more than $1,000, right? If it's any good. Some people have spent over $2,000 on a good AR-15 or on a good assault rifle, right? Most of the time when people commit gun crimes, they fire 3 to 4 rounds. Okay, so 3 to 4 shots are fired during the average gun crime. Also, most gun crimes are committed with cheaply purchased guns, right? Cheap these little Taurus, little crappy guns, or Caltech, isn't that another one? Right? These really crappy little pistols or revolvers. Oftentimes, these guns are thrown away after the crime has been committed. So I highly doubt someone is going to have a $2,000 assault rifle and pop off a couple rounds and then throw that baby away, right? Yeah, so assault rifle ban, that was an exploratory research because we had no idea what an assault rifle ban would do to the overall gun crime rates and how much people would want like the demand for those. But unfortunately, that study was exploratory. Now, unfortunately, it was inconclusive because of that sunset clause and the grandfathering clause. So those of you who look at this study and they say, oh, assault rifle bans don't work, you're wrong, because we don't know if they work or not. We just don't know. Those of you say that they do work by interpreting that the automatic pistol finding, you are also wrong. Okay? It's inconclusive. Descriptive research is when we just want to describe something, right? We want to say how many crimes exist, how many crimes have happened over these periods of a year. So descriptive research or description-based research describe something for us, right? Then you have explanatory research that tells us why something happens, right? Why do some people believe that the police are doing good? Why do some people believe they're not? Why do crimes exist in hotspots? So hotspots are, so essentially we found, so descriptive research found for us that 65% of crimes occur in about 5% of the geographic locations of a jurisdiction. Meaning like most of the crime doesn't occur uniformly across a jurisdiction, but it occurs in small little pockets within a jurisdiction. Those are called hotspots, right? So that's descriptive, described that for us. But then we wanted to say, well, why does that occur? Why does crime exist in hotspots? Well, that's because of routine activities. So here's ever heard of routine activities theory. Routine activities theory says that when you have a motivated offender, lack of a capable guardian, and a suitable target or victim, crime will occur under those conditions. So what David Weisberg and some friends found was that, and also Larry Sherman, found that in those hotspots, you typically have those three conditions. You have a motivated offender, you have lack of a capable guardian, and you have a suitable victim or target. Right? So they explain to us using research why hotspots exist. Then you have applied research. And that is when you want to evaluate something, right? So you either want to evaluate a policy or a problem, all right? So let's say hotspots policing has been implemented to stop crime. Well, okay, we're going to look at the crime problem before, and then we're going to implement the hotspots policing, and then we're going to see how that crime is afterwards. That's evaluation research, right? Then you can also look at the existing impacts that a policy has had on society, and then anticipate what the future is going to be using the trajectory of that policy. And then you can then say, okay, well, if we do this, then we can fix this problem this much. So you sort of project into the future. So a lot of what the new school criminologists do is applied research, right? So we look at certain policies, right? So some descriptive research can also be applied research. Some explanatory research can also be applied research. And some exploratory research can also be applied research, right? But applied research is when you're focusing on policy and problems. So you're focusing on laws or new programs or new initiatives, or you're focusing on problems, and you're studying the effectiveness or the extent of those problems. Whereas the other three can be much more broad. Okay, and that concludes our first topic lecture. I will see you, or you'll hear from me again.